We have an incredible program for you this morning. We have some dynamic speakers, both Taz and Bob. So just to give you a little bit of background, Taz is an award-winning business and personal empowerment coach, best-selling author and international speaker. And Bob is a former diplomat, contributing writer, and a strong advocate to the USAID LGBT projects in the Dominican Republic. So we're going to go ahead and get started, but let me just give you a little bit more background. Bob is a rising from modest beginnings in rural Oklahoma, serving to Senior Policy Advisor Ambassador James Wally Brewster in the Dominican Republic. He's an accomplished writer, speaker, activist, and former U.S. diplomat. A fighter for gender equality and human rights, he champions causes around the world, such as LGBT equality, gender-based violence, diversity inclusion, foreign policy, and fair elections. So we have great company here with us this morning. Taz, an extraordinary powerhouse, has a very moving story from breakdown to breakthrough. And it talks about her journey through life to create a powerful, authentic brand message and a tribe of clients that advocates on how you can do the same. All right, she came from a hellish abusive relationship that resulted in having her to go into hiding out of safely, broke her back, came through all kinds of obstacles and challenges. In her early 30s, she looked at her life from the outside and said something had to change. She had a very professional, high-flying corporate position in the UK as a journalist editor for the world's biggest business-to-business publishing outfits, and was a driving force with Audi, meetings in Paris, Armani, Tag Heuer, and others. So her career no longer filled her up. She'd been promoted from everything she was doing and constantly tired. And then she decided that she was coming out and living her best life to the fullest. So we'd like to thank our panelists and for being with us today. And we look forward to hearing all about why DEI and Pride Month is important to us. All right, so let's give a warm round of applause to our panelists. So thank you. All right, so I want to go ahead and get started with just a couple of questions. So let's just start with, and Taz or Bob, you can just jump in at any time. What has been what brings you the confidence that you have? Do you have confidence? Because, I read your bios and we think, wow, these are real powerhouses. So what is it that you say gives you great confidence?
Bob, do you want to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, sure, Taz. Why not put me on the spot there? So
you're welcome. You're very welcome.
I see how this is going to play out. Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for having me here today. It's interesting, and I think probably Taz can also equate to this. It's one thing to be in front of a group of people and speak about certain subject matters that you're passionate about. Often at times it's very difficult to talk about yourself. So I am going to do one thing real quick. So everyone will have a little, because I am not going to talk a lot about myself. I'll be happy to talk about projects I've been involved in, and I'm happy to talk about global pride and things that of that nature. But if you want to know more about me, I'm going to put in the chat. Let's see, how do I do this? I'm going to do, there we go, paste. There we go. All right. You can click that link and everything you want to know about me is there. Confidence is an interesting, it's an interesting question or topic to discuss about oneself. I don't know that, I don't know that I have a lot of confidence. I think where the perception of confidence arises from is honestly, you have to find somebody in your life that without fail truly loves you. And that's where my confidence comes from. It comes from a place of love. I've been very, very, very fortunate I'll be married 32 years in November of this year. Thank you. Legally in the United States since 2013. With that said, as with any relationship, whether it's with another human being or whether it's a relationship with associations or relationships with friends or relationships, with governments for that matter, all relationships are built on they start from a foundation and a platform of trust. And so as long as you have trust in your life and you have love in your life, I think that in and of itself will translate, or for me, translates to confidence.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Taz, you want to add on to that? Yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about me. I think confidence, it is an interesting one, and something that not a lot of people realize about me, and it's sometimes difficult for people to swallow, is that I'm naturally one big introvert. But when you have confidence and you mix that with what I call a soul mission, that will drive me to essentially get over myself and do things that push me out of that comfort zone a little bit. So if I go back to the days where I was hiding, where I was deeply closeted, where I was in that abusive relationship, to the outside world, I was confident, performing, successful, top of my career in publishing, wearing a tag, driving an Audi, which is as far as the connection with those brands go. So something got mixed up a little bit there. I was absolutely shattered on the inside, but I presented as being very confident. And Edward's touched earlier on my breakdown, and Sonia touched about the breakdown I went through earlier. I genuinely see that as my breakthrough. There was an awful lot of hurdles and challenges led to that breakdown. And at the time, although that felt absolutely hellish, I genuinely now believe that breakdown was one of the best things that ever happened to me. That turned into my breakthrough, because all the activities and the circumstances that led to that got me to the point where I broke open so much that I was able to shed all of the masks I'd been wearing over the years, everything that I thought I needed to do, to wear, to present as, to appease everyone else. And from that place of rock bottom, I sometimes joke that rock bottom is the best, it's the most solid base to push back up from. From that base of being opened wide up and being at rock bottom, I was able to rebuild in the shape that felt more like me. The shape that perhaps I would have been had society not intervened and tried to shape me sausage factory style into the good little girl it wanted me to be, into the conformist. And I think society does that so much for so many of us, and I think it's where some of the work you guys do is so beautiful, because it gives people that a way to step out of themselves a little. So from that place of feeling that as though I was a blank canvas, I was able to paint my own colors onto that canvas. And I would absolutely agree with Bob. Love is such a great part of it. I've been with my partner, now my wife, for 25 years next April. We've been married since we were allowed to in the UK, so 8 years. We got married on my 40th birthday, which was the best gift I ever could have had. But I think alongside that love, the other things that build confidence, for me at least, are authenticity. And I know that's one of those words that gets a lot of backlash. And I think that's because we shouldn't ever have to tell somebody that we are authentic. That is something that we show someone. If someone tells you, oh, I'm authentic, that's a little flag. You show people that you are authentic. Authenticity, integrity, love, gratitude, learning to be grateful for everything that happens in our lives. And I think that creates a rich melting pot from which we can create confidence.
Wow, thank you so much. I agree with that. Authenticity should be something that's shown, that we shouldn't have to try to create. So thank you both. So another question that I have for you all is, How has being a member of the LGBTQ plus community been a factor in pursuing your professional goals?
Please, Taz.
Okay. I was trying to do it in order and be kind then, Bob. Okay. How has it affected my professional goals? Now that I'm completely out, it hasn't. In the early days, when I was trying to be a good girl, then it became difficult, particularly in the early days of the relationship with my wife. So there was a time when we were both actually working in the same office, and everyone thought that we were just, I was her lodger. So that was interesting for a while. I did have some fun with that. Every now and then I'd send big romantic gifts and have them delivered to the office, and then sit there smirking because, of course, she'd be embarrassed and couldn't tell anyone who they were from. So it was difficult trying to remain undetectable, which we felt we needed to do for a number of reasons that are irrelevant now. But as part of that, of course, people would generally start to assume, particularly people who'd seen us together. We weren't doing massive public displays of affection. We weren't holding hands in public, anything like that. But I think when you love someone and you are seen in the same place with them frequently, people pick up on that vibe. It's hard to hide love, isn't it? You can't put a magical cloak of invisibility over it when you love someone that much. So people would start to question. And in one of my roles, there was a situation where one of the staff members was found to have been sending some quite abusive and derogatory emails, pointing largely to my sexuality. One of the weirdest issues I found was, I don't know how international this is, but over here there's a lorry firm known as Eddie Stobart, and they have fans and all sorts. And somebody asked me, "Are you a member of the Eddie Stobart fan club?" And no. And that was her strange way of asking, "Are you gay?" I don't know why. But outside of career, we still do have to be careful. If anyone here has listened to my most recent TED talk, Dangerous Rainbow, that talks about some of the issues we've had out in public. We once grabbed each other's hand for a split second, just a kind of quick squeeze as we were walking through a town centre, and had two people following us around, quoting scripture at us around the shopping centre for what felt like, it was probably only 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. I've been singled out and backed up against a wall by someone who was lecturing me on morality. We've had awful slurs thrown at us. And again, we don't particularly present as stereotypically lesbian. Apart from that, I have short hair. Yeah, but I also wear makeup. Whoa, all of these crazy ideas that people have. What else in terms of my career? In one of the jobs I was headhunted for, the director messaged the head office to tell them that they wouldn't need to worry about me taking maternity leave, because obviously if you're gay, everything stops working. There was a situation where there was an outdoor pursuits event that someone wanted to organize for clients, and someone said that I should organize it because I'm more like a man. So there've been little things all the way along. And the famous story I always quote was being on the road with a male colleague, and it was before marriage was legalized, but not long after we had civil partnerships. And he said, "I don't know what you lot keep banging the drum for, Taz, because, why do you still need these pride events? Nobody cares anymore. I mean, you can adopt, you can have kids, you'll be able to get married soon. What's the problem?" And I said, so tell me something. When you get married, if you go off and have children and one of your kids comes to you and says, "Dad, I think I may be gay," will you be okay with that? And he thought for a second and said, "No, of course I won't be okay with that." "But why won't you be okay with that if everything's all right now?" And he said, "Well, it'll never really be normal, will it?" And it's the little things like that. Right. That's the ripple effect. We do still need pride events, right, not just because of ignorance, but because across the world, across the global stage, people are still being stereotyped, raped, murdered, beaten, imprisoned. Yeah, violence. All the time, we still have that kind of attitude. We're still going to need pride events. So I went off topic a little bit there, but I hope that's answered the question for you. It does. Thank you so much. But as I was listening to you, I heard a lot of stereotypes and how many of us or many people put up filters
and
Yeah.
those filters are never lowered. And so they come with these filters of this, they should be this. Why are you wearing makeup if you're gay? Oh my God, that's right. No reproductive organ, so thank you for sharing that story. Bob, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. Taz touched on several topics, and I'm going to use a word to start off with that some may consider to be relatively controversial, and that word is conformity. And I know that within the LGBTQ community, conformity has become a really dirty word. But I want to go back and kind of build on a little bit of my experience about as a professional when I came out, if you will. And my coming out personally and coming out professionally happened simultaneously. And the reason it happened simultaneously is because right after college, and this was many years ago, but I'll just go ahead and give you the year, 1987, I went to work. My first career was what they refer to in the UK as a trolley dolly. I prefer to say that I was an international purser for American Airlines for many, many, many years. And I will tell you, the job was truly extraordinary. I had more education walking up and down the aisle on an airplane than I ever got sitting in a classroom at the university. So with that said, because I was a trolley dolly, I was able to basically be out, because it was really interesting. Our male counterparts who were heterosexual, and believe it or not, they're actually heterosexual flight attendants. I know that's a big shocker, but there are males who are heterosexual who actually choose to be flight attendants. And I felt kind of bad for them. It was almost like the reverse, because they didn't stand a chance. I mean, they were straight, but everybody just was like, oh, he must be queer. So it was okay. It was this environment where, I could be as gay or as I wanted to be, or I could just be me. I could conform into basically anything I wanted. But as that career transitioned, as I transitioned out of that career and into a new career, I came to the realization that a lot of professional success is built on conformity, or for this group I'm going to use image. And there is a reason all of you are image consultants and that you have this organization, and that is because you build images for people to present. And I had to build that image as well for my second career. And then I had to build another image for my third career. Now, with all of that said, I never lost who I was internally. I am just who I am. And I've always been that person, but my image has never been what I felt as controversial. And part of that, I think, is conscious. But also part of it is I have sought a path that what image can I present that's going to allow me to be the most successful professionally without compromising my personal integrity. And I think bringing all those together can be quite challenging, of course, but it can also provide a great deal of comfort as you move forward in life. And so for me, image and conformity actually have been very positive things. And so I'll leave it there for the moment.
Oh, thank you so much. So it sounds like you were a chameleon as your trolley cart person. You could be a chameleon. And I like what you said about success is conformity, is based on conformity. And as image consultants, we do build images. So thank you so much. So another question I'd like to ask the panelists, what have been some of your proudest and personal moments as you've come out as an LGBTQ member?
Proudest personal moments. I suppose from the inside out, for me, it would be standing in my power and refusing to hide anymore. So I grew up in quite a conservative family, and being a gay woman just was not acceptable. But there came a point where, particularly after the death of my father, where I just needed my partner by my side. And so I just stopped hiding. Now, to give some context, this is on the back of situations such as my family members sitting us on the drive before we'd gone into a family party and asking us to invent boyfriends for the night, which of course we didn't, but that was the huge elephant in the room. There were rumors being spread around the family, including photos of me in full evening dress with a couple of guys who had been our hosts at an event. And this story went around the entire family that I was engaged to one of them. The guy was in a kilt. He was a Scottish guy, and they gave him the name of Duncan MacDonald, and he was a Scottish laird, and I was due to inherit all this wealth. And that had come from one single source in the family who was just trying to create a fiction because it was far too shameful for someone and their daughter for a daughter and someone in their family to be anything other than heterosexual. So I think internally, for me personally, finding a way through that, and it was rocky for a while, but I'm happy to say now that my family are by and large really accepting. They see my wife Asha as one of the family as well, and that was scary, but I'm proud of that one. And also one of my proudest moments connected to being a member of the LGBTQIA community was that TED Talk I mentioned earlier. So I've done 3 TED Talks. I've been invited to speak for each one. And the last one I was asked to speak about was all about equality, diversity, fighting against homophobia. And I genuinely almost did not take that talk. I love speaking. I love being able to say I've done TED Talks, but I very nearly didn't do that because number one, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into being a gay speaker. And number 2, I was a little bit afraid of the backlash. And in that talk, I spoke about what I referred to as the liberal blind spot. And we've kind of touched on this briefly, in that everyone out there who is an ally, because they are so accepting, they tend not to see the issues. They tend not to be aware of the negative bias that is still out there. And so there comes a point where they will say, a bit like the conversation I spoke about earlier, just stop hitting us over the head with this rainbow truncheon. We know, shut up. You're turning us off, stop it. And they're not stopping to think, but actually the message isn't for us. The message is for the people who are not allies. The message is for the people who are still waiting outside gay bars to beat people up. The message is for people who are still creating all these slurs and perpetuating homophobic hate crimes. And eventually I came to the conclusion that if I'd been asked to do this, I should take that and I should run with it. And I had all my stats ready and I did all the research, and just doing the research was terrifying. It's one thing knowing it exists. It's another thing being confronted with those figures in black and white. And after the TED Talk went live, as you might imagine, I started to get all of the homophobes coming out onto my social media channels. And some of it was absolutely vile. It does not bear repeating. But what makes me proud is that aside from a couple that I was just not going to engage with everyone that wasn't too extreme, I opened a conversation. While everyone was saying to me, just block them and delete them and report them, I said, no, I've done this talk. I've opened the discussion. They have these beliefs from somewhere. Nobody is born homophobic, racist, any other ism. Nobody is born in that way. We learn these things. And so if I've opened that platform, the least I can do is attempt to open a conversation, to thank them for commenting, to ask them why they believe that, to ask where those thoughts come from. And a handful of those people were turned around through that conversation to the point where one of them was saying, will you do another talk? We would love to and learn more. We didn't realize any of this. Thank you. So that was both terrifying, but it made me immensely proud to be able to do that.
That is incredible. So you took a bad situation as an opportunity and you became responsive versus reactionary.
Yes.
So good for you. Congratulations. All right, Bob.
You know, it's interesting. I grew up in a very, very, very small country, rural, poor community. My publicist likes to use the word modest, which you'll see in my bio, but modest would have been a far step up from the type of childhood that I had. With all of that said, you know, I used to wish for, you know, a family, a traditional family. And I wished for, you know, a family that had, you know, a big, beautiful brick home. And I wished for a family that had, you know, money in the bank and that could that could afford the luxuries of life. You know, it's interesting, they say, be careful what you wish for, because I think primarily because the lack of success, if you will, described by the global community that my family had, there were no expectations for my life at all. And there were no judgments. Honestly, I think my parents' only hope was that if I didn't go to jail at some point, then I am a success in life. Well, I never went to jail. So I guess that made me a huge success. What I'm most proud of in my life is that I was able to take, again, going back to the platform of having parents that I knew loved me, regardless of my sexual orientation. And even though they received great pushback from their friends and ancillary family members, they never reflected that on me. So I was able to go through life with a sense of comfort that no matter what I did, except going to jail, which again, I never did, that I would still be loved. And my proudest moment was building a life together with my husband, so that when we moved to a very hostile environment in the Dominican Republic, that we were able to take that hostility and show that community that we were human beings, and that all human beings, despite their background, where they came from, their, you know, socioeconomic status, their nationality, color of skin, LGBTQ, any label you want to put on somebody, that the basic label is that we're just human beings. And if you will just engage with a human being one-on-one as a human, all of these other labels very quickly begin to peel away. And we were able to peel a lot of those labels from the various communities that were highly discriminated against in the Dominican Republic. And I used to say, when I first moved there, I used to say, what's the level? People say, well, this country is so bigoted and this country is so discriminatory. And I was like, no, I don't believe that they're bigoted or discriminatory. I believe they haven't been exposed. And I said, you know, and I would say this to the LGBTQ community. I would say, you know, we really have it better than many other members of society here. And they would like, how's that so? And I would go through the list. And quite frankly, a straight woman has far more discrimination than a member of the LGBTQ community in the Dominican Republic. Now, and I could take you down a list. The important is that we worked with every single community that was a minority community to bring them collectively together as one community, so that they themselves could present themselves in a fashion that, first and foremost, we began with being human. And we had a great deal of success doing so. And it truly changed, again, to go back to image, it completely changed the image of minority communities, including LGBT people in the Dominican Republic. And I'm most proud of that in my life.
That is incredible. You were a change agent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, I want to go to a couple
Read
of
about it in the
questions.
book if you wish.
I can't wait.
Make sure. I can't wait either. I want to go towards our AICI body. We always like to have a learning for them in terms of, what can they take away with? So my question here is kind of twofold. I want to ask you, what are your client development recommendations in the LGBTQ community for an AICI image consultant? And from your perspective, how can an AICI image consultant best assist the LGBT community with regards to image, fashion, and/or style? Client development style.
It's interesting. I would like to jump out here real quick on this because I think there's this perception by the members of who are not members of the LGBTQ community that we are, that we are all basically the same. That we all like to wear flamboyant clothes. We all like to, dress up in drag, that we all only like to go to the most extreme, and let there be no mistake, there are segments of our community who enjoy doing that. There are segments of our community, believe it or not, that have never dressed in drag or never put on makeup. And when I say that, I would give anything if I had the confidence and the talent to do drag. It's one of the most phenomenal expressions of individuality, I think, that exists today. And RuPaul took something that was highly, highly negative, even in our own community, and has made it probably one of the most recognized expressions of conformity, if you will, globally. Everyone, no matter where you go now in the world, knows what drag is. And it is an art and it is a talent. With that said, I think the reason that worked is there was a presentation and an understanding of culture, and there is a culture around that. But within our LGBTQ community, we have many, many different cultures. And I think to leave you with a takeaway is to understand there is opportunity as an image consultant on a wide spectrum of culture. And so recognize that you have such a great ability to influence all of those various cultures by engaging with them on their own cultural level. So that's my thought. And I hope if you have any questions about that further, we could explore that.
Thank you. I completely agree. Taz?
Firstly, I love that, Bob, and I think you should do drag. Do. Even
I
if you
would
do
be
it once.
pretty, I promise.
Do it. Do it, Bob. Do it. For me, similarly, listen. Don't go in with preconceived ideas. I mean, when you look at the spectrum of identity across the community, it's huge. And when you get into the spectrum of identity between those who identify as female, that's massive again. So don't assume that there are stereotypes everywhere. But just as Bob spoke about elements of the community loving to be standout and flamboyant, well, there are elements of the heterosexual community that like to be flamboyant as well. I think that the real thing is listen to where they are coming from, listen to what's on the inside. If you're working with a woman who identifies as somewhere on that spectrum, hear what she has to say. Some will want to be more masculine, some will be high femme, some are somewhere in the middle, some will want to be edgy, some will want to be rocky or punky or surfy. Just listen, because there's culture, yes, But if we just put culture to the side for a moment, for the vast majority of people on that LGBTQIA spectrum, the way they choose to appear outwardly has nothing to do with their sexuality. It has to do with who they are on the inside. So listen, ask questions, don't assume, don't try to mold, just listen to what they really need. You will find a lot of people, I'm sure, who have been conforming to some extent for most of their lives. And I always remember going to, I was staying with some friends, I was presenting at an event and it was summer. And I came downstairs and I was wearing a long gypsy skirt. And these two friends were both women. They were far more, one of them particularly was far more onto the butch end of the stereotype. And she looked at me and went, "What are you wearing that for?" I said, what do you mean? She said, "You're wearing a skirt." Well, it's summer, I'm hot, I have skirts. And she said, but you could pass for het. And she called her wife and said, "Come and look at what Taz is wearing. What is this, your show outfit or something?" And I said, "No, it's summer. I like this skirt." So that there are all kinds of nuances in there, just as you will have people who have been trying to conform to appear to be straight. You've got another branch of people who are terrified of presenting as straight because they need to make a statement and they need to be seen as gay. And then you'll have people like me, for whom the way I appear, nothing to do with the fact that I happen to be attracted to women, and obviously one in particular. So just be open to that. Try not to go in there with any preconceptions, and recognize that perhaps more than any other element of the wider community, you will have people there who are fearful of conforming or not conforming, and you got to really deep listen, open your ears and your heart.
I agree. Thank you so much. So for an image consultant that's out there listening and will listen later on, and they say, how do I get involved with the LGBT community, or what's my first step? I mean, it may or may not be something that they go seek, but what would you say if I said, I'm really interested in working with the LGBT community? Me, myself personally, I've worked with the community for several years, have always been an advocate for our local regional conference here in this southern tier region of the United States. So, but for someone who says, I don't really know, or I don't feel comfortable, what will be your one recommendation to them?
Talk about it, be an ally, be visible as an ally. So that could be conferences, it could be support groups, it could simply be showing up powerfully -deliberate on social media channels. Start using the relevant hashtags, start finding the conversation, chipping in, being of service, and just be there and be visible and be open.
I love it. Yes. Bob?
Well, Taz took the words right out of my mouth, honestly. My first thought process was be an ally. I have many friends after my tenure as a diplomat in the Dominican Republic who have reached out to my husband and I personally because they have had a child that has come out. And what I find interesting also is that, in today's world, many blessings, of course, children come out, not adults, but literally children come out. And their children come out in junior high and high school. And for some reason, they have this idea that I'm some expert on how they should handle that. Being childless, I am, trust me, no expert on that. But I always refer them immediately to PFLAG. And I have seen all of them evolve into being an ally for the community as a whole. And I think that is your first step, is if you want to engage with any community, you're going to have to love and support that community. And it's going to have to be genuine, because you will be spotted very quickly if you are not.
Right. Those are great ways to become an ally. And then you mentioned that we do notice that younger children are coming out early, junior high and high school. What would you say to someone who is struggling? I mean, this is a global body that we, AICI represents, and different cultures in different countries have different mores and values, and have different stereotypes about the LGBTQ plus community. What would you say to someone who is struggling to come out as an LGBTQ plus in their professional career?
Well, if it's in their professional career, then clearly they're an adult. So I can speak to that as one adult to another. Look, there are consequences to every single thing we do in life. There is a consequence. Some of them are good, and some of them are not so good. But as to full circle back to what Taz said in her opening statement, her breakdown became her breakthrough. And you will never break through to be the genuine soul that you were born to be if you are hiding any element of who you truly are. So you can certainly in your professional career present an image or conform to certain rules or normalities within your professional environment, but you absolutely will never have a breakthrough, ever, if you don't truly live your authentic self. And all that means is being comfortable with who you truly are. And so, for example, a very slight example is you can't hide the person you love and be authentic to yourself and be a genuine person. Because the normality of any professional environment, and this is just one example, is that people will talk about their personal relationships. And if you hide that, whether you are single or married, then you are not engaging on a genuine level. You actually are hiding something of yourself.
I agree. So we want to kind of look and see, there were some questions I saw in the chat from the audience. Rachel, do you want to ask a question or see what's on there? And so maybe one of the panelists can answer the question.
Sure. Let me take a moment to look through here. A lot of people think that this conversation is very valuable. So great question, Sonia, great answers to our panelists. There is a question that says, is there any association like AICI that you could build relationships with?
Is that for the panelists?
Yes.
I have no idea on that one. Certainly there are, here in the UK, there are many different allyship and LGBTQIA support groups for various different professions. And of course, there are things like pride organising bodies, and there are lots of support groups. But whether that would be in the same camp as AICI, not that I'm aware of, but certainly there will be lots of organisations and lots of groups that are all about being inclusive and supportive of the community.
Yes, I would say just for myself, and I'm in the US, I don't know what on the scale of 1 to 10 if LGBTQ is more accepted in the US or it's just different regions, but I would encourage the AICI body to start locally. Start where you live. In your community, your immediate community. There is a Chamber of Commerce, which is how I got involved about 5-6 years ago, and then it just kind of grew from there. But kind of hone where you live first, and then make a difference there, and then kind of spread the spider leg out moving forward. But that's just my recommendation. Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
Actually, I would have to say also I'm not really aware of, specifically for talking about organizations like AICI. I would think the very closest would be, there is an LGBT Chamber of Commerce nationally, and there are local chapters, and that might be a good place to start, because the members of those chambers are involved in so many different organizations that allies specifically would be more than well received. So I would say that would be a really good place to start as well.
I agree. I agree as well. So,
Also, I would recommend all the major corporations have LGBTQ plus groups. So if you are involved with, if you are in the corporate side and you are working with corporations, check with their leadership to see if they have an LGBTQ group that you could become involved.
right. I would agree, because right now, we have the term DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's years ago, I always said that diversity wasn't just black and white, that it was very inclusive, 12, 15 years ago, I mentioned that. And DEI is not a checkbox. A lot of companies are now have DEI. Oh, we have to have a department, and they've become reactionary to everything that's happening. And I always say it's a smart business initiative. It's a best practices. It should be implemented as a best practice. And so to have our organization, AICI Global, to have a DEI, committee and, a department per se, this is not going away. It's the world in which we live in. So this is a best business practice. So, thanking our guest speakers, this morning for being here and sharing their personal experiences, and then how we as an AICI body and image consultants can become involved and realize that people are people, and to lower your filters and your stereotypes, and to engage with the LGBTQ plus community as you would any other person. And so, there's generations of us in the AICI Global, and different generations have different mindsets and mind thoughts about what it is and what it's not. And so I love, Taz, how you said, oh yeah, just because I'm a gay woman that, I can't wear makeup. It's like there are still those stereotypes that are alive and kicking. And part of our committee is to reduce or erase the biases and educate about this is not going away. This is the world we've always lived in, but it's really the world that is what we can see now. And so
it's a really, really valid point you raised there about it not being a checkbox. And I think for those of you who are working with corporations, one of the starting points might be to even ask if they have a diversity and equality and or equity and inclusion policy, and how far that goes. And the second you start to scratch that surface, you may find that for a lot of them, it is just a tick box, in the same way that so many of the big brands turn their logos rainbow during Pride Month, but then they're not doing anything to support their LGBTQIA staff members and customers outside of that. Yeah. So I think actually, so long as we do that with compassion and holding on to our integrity and being conscientious about it, if we start to ask those questions, is there a group I can get involved with? Is there a policy? Is there anything I can do to support? You will also be opening up that door and just giving people a gentle nudge in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That is just one of my, I want to say a pet peeve, but this is not going away. I'm excited to be a part of AIC's, initiative for DEI, and it is best practices. It's a best business practice as an organization. So are there any other questions from the audience?
Yes, we have one question, which would be great to close on.
Okay.
What would you change, if anything, the image consultant approach to an LGBTQ plus customer with regard to enhancing their style or image objectives without falling into bias?
I think for me, this taps back into everything I said earlier. Listen, open your ears, open your heart, open your eyes, drop your preconceptions. Don't expect them to be conforming, and be willing to drop really into compassion and have those deep conversations about what it is that person truly wants. Who are they under those layers? And you also will have to take into account how much they are ready to display the real them. If they've been hiding for a long time or conforming for a long time, and again, remember, that's not always conforming to a stereotype. You will have some people, particularly people who've come out later in life. You know, I remember a friend saying to me once, you know, I've spent the first 30 years of my life conforming for men. I'm not about to start conforming for women. It's about allowing people to absolutely be in their truth, and they might not know what that is. So actually, your role as an image consultant might expand and might go deeper with someone who has been closeted or conforming for a while, because they just won't know how to express the truth of who they are. But what's really, really important is that you do not go into the stereotypes. You don't try to steer. You listen and make suggestions. I would say make suggestions across an entire spectrum and allow them to gravitate to what feels right for them, whilst potentially needing to hold their hand a little bit if they've come to you wanting to break that conformity, whilst holding their hand a little bit and steering them away from going straight back into their comfort zone, because otherwise, why are they speaking to you? It's going to be different for everyone, but you might need to find a happy medium. Don't know how helpful that is, but what about you, Bob?
Yeah, I would simply say take an opportunity as an image consultant professional to explore the wide spectrum of opportunity that is out there, to learn about what you don't know before you engage with someone and begin to either suggest or advise. If that way, it provides a comfort level that you're not automatically ready to box them into something, that you have this knowledge and this of the wide spectrum of what image is. And I think that'll give you a better foundation and basis for communicating effectively with your potential customer and or opportunity there.
And I would just like to say before we close, with regards to working with that community, think about, for the ones that are coming out, definitely probably the older audience, such as what Bob says, they're not really sure where to go or how to go in terms of their style. Like, I mean, I see visually, and I know you all do in your community as well, just like I do any other person. I'm like, well, what did they think? What do they have on? Like, you know, that's a potential client. And there's a struggle, you know, sometimes there's a struggle, and just having that conversation of, you know, I think your style might be, you know, classic romantic, let's just say, and they don't know how to express that. So we're taking all of our styles that we know as image consultants, and they still apply to the LGBTQ community. Like Bob said, everyone doesn't dress in drag. He would love to, and I'd love to see it. But, you know, they have styles that they're trying to discover themselves. And so it's up to us as an opportunity to say, you know what, they're another human who doesn't quite know their style or can't figure how to fine tune or hone it in so that their true authentic self is shining through. So, and then you think about what's going on, like in the landscape of, you know, trans, and, you know, that's coming out, and this, you know, the surgeries that are happening, and they're going through hormonal changes, and it's the same. And you look at that as an opportunity, like, this is a, you know, trans that's coming into a female body who is going to have hormones, you know, all of that, and still doesn't know how to handle that, you know. And it's up to us as an opportunity to say, you know what, let me try to help you. Let's have a conversation. Just like Taz said, communication and languaging is going to be key, but they need to feel safe with us. And so being involved in a very small local platform allows for trust, opportunities of trust. Like, you know, she's really supported us. Like, okay, she spoke on personal branding. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that I was, you know, a relaxed casual, or I was a creative dramatic. I need to have that conversation with her. So look at it as an opportunity, and it's a growth opportunity, not just for the community, but for us as AICI members, as we can build a business on this. You know, it's a big business opportunity, and it's one that's a service that we are providing to a broader community.
Could I add one final point there? Just when
Yes.
you're working with the trans community, of course, we talked about surgery and hormones, but also remember that not everyone who is transitioning is necessarily going to be doing the surgery or the hormones. So be
Right.
careful to not assume there, because that can bring another set of challenges when it comes to their
Challenges.
outwards appearance and how to dress.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.